On today's show, with a new head coach and a new superstar duo, could the Milwaukee Bucks be off to a slow start this season? Giannis had some interesting comments to make after his second preseason game yesterday. So we're going to break down what Giannis said. We're going to look at the early season schedule and ask whether we should be prepared to be a little bit patient to start this NBA season.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. And alongside me from the Bucks Radio Network, one home preseason game to shake the rust off and then into the regular season next week, it's Justin Garcia. And we thank everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single weekday. Just over a week as we record this podcast, we'll be doing a post-game podcast for the season opener Bucks and Sixers. We're very excited about that. Milwaukee dropped the giveaway schedule today, which is always something that if you're a Bucks fan, you need to take a close look at and see what bobbleheads and other ridiculous stuff they got going that we all like to keep. So that means that the season isn't too far away, and we appreciate the support right through the preseason and leading up to the season. Get involved in the show, subscribe, drop a like. Drop a comment and continue to support the show as it continues to grow. And there's a lot of excitement around Dame. We appreciate it. But maybe there's a little bit of patience required here, Justin. And that's going to be the topic of today's show. Just quickly, yesterday I mentioned there was going to be an announcement coming up on the podcast. I did tweet about it yesterday, but I understand that not everyone uses Twitter. We'll get into this more on another episode. We're going to talk Bucks today, the more important stuff than this. But I've got a week to go on the podcast. My last podcast hosting will be the post-game show against the Sixers next week. Hopefully it's a happy farewell and the Bucks get off to a 1-0 start, but we will wander through that. With Frank next week, the post-game show, it'll be my last one. I've done over 4 years, over 1,000 podcasts, Justin, hundreds of hours with Frank. I'm going to say hundreds of hours with you over the years as well. So it's going to be a little bit weird when I wake up and aren't instantly thinking about what I'm going to talk about 5 days a week, 300 plus days a year about the Milwaukee Bucks right through the offseason. But different job opportunity for me. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. But I just wanted to touch on that now if you didn't see it on Twitter. So a week to go for me. Let's have some fun. Join the show. And we'll have a good time here on the last week as we always have. And I'm sure I'll be around in the future as well. Maybe that disappoints some people, Justin. You can't keep everyone happy in this world of daily podcasting. But I am a little bit concerned about the happiness of Bucks fans to start this season, because I think we've seen in very limited minutes from Dame and Giannis some extreme positives. But Khris Middleton has been slowly managed to the start of the regular season. Giannis had off-season surgery. Dame himself said that maybe he's a little bit underdone and in a new situation, and you have a new head coach. So how prepared are you right now to be patient and understand that maybe the Bucks are set up here for a slow start?
I guess what would be your criteria for a slow start? Like below 500 for the first 10 games of the season, something like that? Or 500 even?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bucks fans in recent seasons have been conditioned to, on a number of occasions, really quick starts to the season, but overall a team that has made 50-plus wins a regularity. And if you've been a long-time Bucks fan, you understand that was never even in your thought process. So anywhere around 500 ball, we're not talking about the 2010, 2011, 2012 Milwaukee Bucks. That would be strange territory for this team.
Yeah, I mean, 40 wins was even, holy cow, can we get there for a while with this team? You had the, I can't even remember now. Was it 7-0 that you started last year? The undefeated, the undefeated start to the season. I feel like the year prior to that was kind of like the start that you would be hinting at possibly happening here, where it was a really, really slow build-up that year in coming off of the title when you beat the Nets on ring night, but then they had the massacre in Miami just a couple of days later, and it just compounded, one thing after another. Injuries and not having players available were a big part of that one.
But I think Lopez for one game,
Brook Lopez for one game, and then he wasn't back until what was it, Stone Cold Day, something like that. So I think you certainly you hinted at the comments from Giannis, and I suppose we should give a round of applause to Frank for being the first one to mention this and sniff this out of man, maybe Giannis has some work to do yet in terms of getting in shape. But all that being said, for Giannis to say he's still not there yet, and Dame Lillard has obviously been rusty. There's a lot that goes into that. The offense still looked pretty good. I know it's preseason, but the offense still looked pretty good, even with those guys not being 100% of the way there. And I think their schedule early in the season, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. And the biggest one is there's just a lot of uncertainty with the teams that they're playing early. I mean, everything that's come out of Philadelphia today, who knows what that team is going to look like on opening night. The Hawks were basically the epitome of 500 last year. They didn't do a whole lot of wholesale changes. Quinn Snyder for a full year is going to, I think, make them better. But even still, I'm not sure where the Hawks are at. The Heat seem to be the Bucks' kryptonite, save for that 2021 season, but they've lost more guys than they've added. And you have a lot of those teams that are right around that level, like the Brooklyn Nets and the Knicks. So it seems like early on in the season, you don't have what you did last year, which certainly aided your undefeated start to the season, where the Bucks didn't really play a whole lot of good teams early. You don't have a tough schedule per se, but you have a schedule that is largely made up of teams that realistically are going to be anywhere from like 4th through 9th in the Eastern Conference.
So I've got the schedule, and I'm going to bring it up because on the sidebar here, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I've got tough early schedule. And I probably should have put a question mark next to that, because I don't think on paper this is necessarily a tough schedule, but things do get really challenging after that. In December is a pretty tough month, and certainly it's around February, March. It feels like a little bit of a juggernaut. So, for the Bucks, I think you would have looked at this originally if you said, okay, there's continuity for the roster, everyone comes in feeling fresh and healthy. You would want to take advantage of this early schedule. So I think that's why you just have to look at this as an important start to the season. But let's come back to the Giannis comments just a little bit here in case anyone missed them. So he had a post-game interview last night, and you mentioned the Frank comments. And I will say this, understandably so. I think that there was a few people on YouTube jumping in and saying, wait, you calling Giannis overweight? And let's just clarify. Anyone looking at Giannis right now, Giannis in his own words said that he's a bit heavy at the moment, but for me, you still look at Giannis, and this is one of the most sculpted individuals across the entire damn world. So maybe Giannis being a little bit heavy is very different to my version of putting on a few extra pounds, which I typically do. And I did do a couple of months ago when I found myself working closer over your way there, Justin. So it's a different scenario for Giannis. But, if he weighed in at about 250, I think it was, or whatever the official rating was there, he says he's a little bit heavy. I was a little bit shocked when he said that coming off the postseason surgery, and we said, okay, this is a knee arthroscope. This isn't a major knee surgery, but he said he was only cleared to sprint 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So he hasn't really scrimmaged. He hasn't really played full court basketball. He hasn't been able to play 5-on-5 until very, very recently. And Giannis can say, look, I'm feeling a little bit rusty. No question. I don't think that there was any time for him to have any chemistry with Damian Lillard anyway, because the trade only went down. We know that Khris Middleton hasn't been playing 5-on-5. So when you add all those things together, you do sit back and say, okay, well, we love what the team looks like on paper. We love what we've seen in small sample sizes so far, albeit for some poor shooting from Dame to this point in time. But it does make me look at Giannis and go, he continues to be a marvel, because he's still 15 for 22 from the field. He's looked physically dominant out there on the floor. So when he sits there and says, I'm not even close physically to where I think I'm going to be as the weeks move on to the season, glass half full, you feel pretty good about it. But I want to ask you if you were shocked about his own words, and he's always honest, his own words about how far behind the 8 ball he is. So I want to get to that answer after we talk about Jace Medical, sponsor of today's podcast. And we've discussed Jace Medical and the Jace case on this show quite a bit. And the Jace case is a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. And now you can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs as well. The Jace case offers customizability for your Jace case with dozens of add-on medications. You can choose the medications that fit your personal and your family's unique needs individually there as well. And Jace Medical goes through the evaluation with a doctor, and you're able to get ongoing care from those physicians on any treatment-related questions as well. So all you need to do is go to jacemedical.com and enter the promo code Locked On at checkout for $20 discount on your order. That's promo code Locked On at jasemedical.com. All right, Locked On Bucks rolls on. We've got one preseason game left. That's against the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll wait to see who actually plays in this game. I think based on the YouTube comments, there's a lot of Bucks fans out there that are saying, if the guys are a little bit underdone, let's get them out there. Let's have another game. Let's play 5-on-5 on the court at home in front of home fans and see what they look like there. But we'll have a post-game show most likely early next week to wrap up the preseason and lead us into the regular season there. So make sure you subscribe to notifications on to Locked On Bucks to keep up to date there. I referenced the comments from Giannis, Justin, in terms of him personally feeling underdone. Were you shocked, A, about how in-depth he went to his own preparation, and then B, just some of the details there that I don't think we were totally up to date with?
Yeah, the biggest shock to me was, you already mentioned it, but when he was cleared to take on more stuff and like when he was doing things as marginal as sprinting was the big shock. I'm not surprised that Giannis would be so candid because that's what we've come accustomed to hearing from him. I was surprised to hear the levels that he put it at of where he viewed himself at. That, I think a lot of it was just excitement to see Giannis. That I think that clouded a lot of what we viewed on Sunday night against the Lakers, where you weren't really watching all too much with a critical eye. It was more just, all right, I'm looking forward to seeing Damian Lillard on the floor and how Giannis can play off of him. And I think that was a carryover too to the game against the Thunder earlier in the week. So I wasn't hypercritical and wasn't necessarily looking for that. It wasn't until Frank made those comments that you started to kind of raise an eyebrow and think, well, I don't know, maybe I'll have to go back and look at that. So hearing Giannis confirm that was very surprising to me, maybe mildly surprising, but really the biggest shock was just his timeline for things. And like, I was only sprinting 3 weeks ago. That was the shock.
I still don't, I don't know. I've looked at it and it's honestly just hard for me to tell. Giannis, it feels like he's got bigger and bigger and bigger every season anyway. So it's hard for me to tell. He doesn't necessarily, to me, look like he's out of shape. He still looked like he was getting up and down the floor. Okay. I kind of read into his comments that it's probably more an internal thing. Maybe his legs feel a little bit heavy because he just hasn't played that high intensity to this level yet. So I would imagine, based on history, it's not going to take Giannis too long to get in the rhythm. And hey, at least he's entering the season feeling fresh, which hasn't been the case for the last few seasons. Clearly, it's just been a long time since he's played that 5-on-5 basketball. He referenced the Miami series last year and said that, look, I wasn't even healthy when I was out there playing. So you're going all the way back to April. We're now obviously in the middle of October. Damian Lillard is in the same boat. And, the shot wasn't falling. I referenced some of the numbers from previous preseasons in years gone by, but we've certainly seen even more comments, whether it's on YouTube or on Twitter. Lots of people that have watched Dame closely and covered Dame and been diehard Portland Blazers fans saying, hey, don't worry about this. He does this every single year. He's going to be just fine a couple of weeks into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried by it. I don't think you are either, that it's not this level of shock and like, holy cow, is Dame going to be as good as we thought that he would be? There's a lot that goes into it, certainly. And, I think the big piece, not only hearing what those that have watched him play in Portland have said and the stats that you referenced to from preseason, but also the fact that, oh, by the way, Damian Lillard didn't have the same offseason that he usually had in terms of access to the facilities and everything else that he would typically do, that his ramp up period was pretty much as the trade was coming into place. I know he was doing some stuff, but once that was finalized and he knew, okay, this is where I'm going to play, and these are the guys that are going to be my teammates, and you go through the open gyms, like that was basically Damian Lillard's offseason.
Yeah, two guys, two of the rare superstars. And I knew this about Dame a little bit, but perhaps not to this extent. Certainly doing some reading over the last few days. He just never plays 5-on-5 in the offseason, I guess. So that means the Bucks have got the two superstar players of the league that just don't get involved in these group scrimmages over the weekend. They just like to go about their own business and do their own thing, and it clearly hasn't impacted them. But I'm sure there's a little bit of ramp-up time there. What about Khris Middleton? So we discuss him at length, never-ending conversation here, and particularly over the last few months or the last year or so, the health has been a big part of that. Adrian Griffin said that they thought he was on track to play some preseason basketball. Is he going to play in this game on the weekend? Because I think he's a guy that maybe, while there won't be too much concern about Dame and Giannis ramping up, I know that Bucks fans do have some concerns over Khris Middleton and where he's at. But everything we've heard is that he's been on track. But I still can't bring myself to think I'll be shocked if he doesn't play on the weekend, even though they said that he was going to.
Yeah, that was one of the more interesting things from Tuesday night when we didn't get the blunt, yes, Khris will play, but Adrian Griffin, when he gave us the availability of guys and said Khris won't go, and then immediately after followed up with, hey, it's still the plan to play him in the preseason. Is he going to play on Friday? It's still the plan to play in the preseason. So I think scrimmage. Well, I suppose we should have kind of pressed him on that, and I didn't factor that in. Yeah, I mean, I have kind of maintained the stance of I'm not getting worried about anything in the preseason, whether it's performance or health of guys just yet. I mean, I understand if Bucks fans want to be in that column and jump to conclusions and already start the season with deep concerns over Khris Middleton, given what we saw last year, fine. I'm not going to be able to talk you out of it. I'm not concerned with it until it starts to become an issue into the regular season. And really, it would start on Friday if we get to the game and we go and sit down to listen to Adrian Griffin before the game, and we're told, yeah, Khris just isn't going to go today. Then you kind of start to raise an eyebrow. But I mean, I think, and we've talked about this before too, my level of, I don't know if concern is even the right word, but my feeling on Khris, it's much different than it would have been if you did not make this Damian Lillard trade. I understand you can talk about the defensive aspects, but if this team stayed status quo, we know that the defense would be very, very good, if not elite. But once you get to the postseason, even with the addition of Malik Beasley, I don't think that solves your offense, and we'd be right back in the same spot. And that would mean you'd need a whole lot more from Khris Middleton, that he would have to be the guy that he was in the playoffs of 2021. And I'm not saying he cannot be that guy anymore, but there's a lot of question marks coming off the last year that he had with injuries. With Damian Lillard in the mix, that changes things for Khris, that I think it affords you the availability to take your time with him more and to say, well, we're not going to play him until he's 100%. And even then, we're going to take it very easy with Khris Middleton because of not just last year, but the last 2 or 3 years that he's had. And, you know, we have this Damian Lillard guy that can more than carry the offense for large portions. So if you didn't have that, you'd need a whole lot more from him offensively. And that's where it starts to change.
The critical nature of Khris Middleton to this team feels like it's lessened just a little bit for exactly the reason that you just mentioned. And that's why I keep coming back to the word patience, because I think, you know, for me at least, and this is completely unfair and it's completely irrational, but there is an impatience to see what it all looks like together. So even yesterday, you know, as I was watching Dame and Giannis, I'm like, okay, hey, look, if Dame misses some shots, cool. I'm looking forward to the first night when he explodes, but you know it's going to happen, so you're not too stressed out about it. But last night I was like, okay, well, now there's no Khris. But now it's also Robin instead of Brooke, and this is just completely different. And there's just an impatience to see all 4 guys on the floor together, because you've said it a number of times. I'm with you. This should be a top 3 offense. I just can't wait until we get to the time where they're all firing on all cylinders at the exact same time. So let us know in the YouTube comments, where's your patience level? Is there any level of stress at all about this team? Because I know that there will be for some people, and I get it. It's the preseason. It's the time to overreact. But I want to get to the schedule next. I'm going to bring it up on the screen and Justin ask you what you think from the first 5 to 10 games. and what's realistic for this team. And then I'll ask everyone in the YouTube comments as well. But first, FanDuel, our sponsor of the podcast today. You can snap into action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over and unders, and more. And as we've referenced a number of times, the win total for the Bucks, check it out. It's been hovering between 53.5, 54.5. And as we've discussed, if the Bucks are set up for a little bit of a slow start, maybe you want to be on the negative side of things and take the under. But you can check it all out. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NBA and NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and Locked On. Let's bring up the schedule here on the screen for the first portion of the season. And it starts with a major challenge. Yes, it's at home, but you have the Philadelphia 76ers, national TV game, Atlanta at home, Miami at home. You already referenced that. That's a tricky start. Then you have to travel to Toronto. I don't think there's high expectations on that Raptors team, but they have been historically a challenge for the Bucks. And then the Knicks, who again fancy themselves as a team that's going to be able to make a run in the postseason. The Brooklyn Nets that are a wild card. Ben Simmons is playing some pretty good basketball. And then a couple of Central Division teams that are also looking to be on the rise in Detroit and Indiana. So how many games is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Add in Orlando and Chicago. So down to November 14, the first 10 games of the season with all those teams that I mentioned. What do you think is a realistic win-loss total there, assuming that you've got Dame, Giannis, and let's throw Khris Middleton in there. That's what we're hearing. He's going to be able to play, and there's not going to be any games missed. So first 10 games, I think I look at that. I reference you don't want to be at 500. There's plenty of winnable games. There's plenty of home games, but it could be potentially tricky.
Well, the biggest thing that tripped me up there was that you had the schedule with the Australian time zone, and was looking at it and thinking, when do we have a 2:30 game? I think I missed that one. I mean, I think, looking at that schedule, and if you kind of double it, I was looking at it before, and I think it's through the first 20 games. It's not like a murderer's row of schedule. No. I think that comes, as you mentioned, later in the year. But those first 20 or so games, I think I counted 4 games, maybe 5 at the most, against teams where I would say, if this team made the playoffs or the play-in tournament, I would be surprised that the rest of their games are against either teams that we have a pretty good feeling that they're going to be in the playoffs, or they're at least in the discussion to be in the mix. So it's not overly difficult, but it's not loaded up with a lot of those easier games like they had to start the season last year. And that to me is going to be most interesting to kind of see where the defense is at, because you got to load up on those easier games and opponents last year and work through some things. And that's where we started to see things like the backcourt of Javon Carter and Drew Holiday, and that helped you kind of build up the defense a little bit and just kind of take off from there, that you banked those wins knowing we're not fully healthy and the injuries kept coming, that you had more of a margin for error. Not that this takes away that margin for error, but I think we all agree the defense is going to be a work in progress for the early portion of the season, that there's just so many changes. And obviously the elephant in the room of, well, who's going to take on those tough perimeter assignments with no Drew Holiday? And, you look at that schedule, if we're focusing on the defense, and you think, okay, as of right now, James Harden is a member of the 76ers. Who knows if that changes, but who's going to take James Harden in that matchup on opening night, assuming he's in that game? Who's going to take Trae Young? Obviously, it would be Dame Lillard, but how is that going to work out? The Jimmy Butler matchup, I mean, we saw him take Drew Holiday, take his lunch money in that series last year, but the Bucks had nobody that could stay with him in that series. And the only guy that you used on him is not on the team now this year. So that becomes interesting. The backcourt for the Knicks. So there's a lot of these questions defensively that I really do wonder if, the first 10 games that you referenced, if this is just going to be like you know what, we just got to score 120 points a night or 130 even, that we're going to have to rely on our offense in the early going and win these games while we figure out our defense, because it's not overly difficult, but you do have some tough perimeter matchups early. My hope is for like a 7-3 start through those first 10 games. 6-4, I think you would live with. If it's 500, and we should preface by it's very early if you're talking about just 10 games out of 82, but we know how the narratives start to form and work. So if the Bucks come out of the gates at 5-5 or 4-6, then it all of a sudden starts to become like, man, what's going on with the Bucks? Or is Damian Lillard still at this level? So I'm not expecting like an 8-2 and the Bucks are just going to be juggernauts because of that defensive side and figuring that out. But my hope is for like a 7-3 start or 6-4 with that schedule.
I'll put it up on the YouTube comments with those teams, and then everyone that's watching this show can give their predictions. I dare say there's going to be some highly positive responses, and then there may be some people that sit on the other side of the fence. But I think this is a very worthwhile conversation to have. And I think it's at least worth flagging, because if you're asking me, yeah, I'm just based on everything we've said and the fact that I think this team is really going to ramp up. And by the way, when they do ramp up, I think they are going to be a regular season juggernaut, but I just think it's going to take a little bit of time. And if you're asking me right now, I think I would take 6-4 and run. And if anything better than that, then you are extremely happy with the way things have been able to start. But I'm a little bit anxious for the season opener against Philly. This is a good team, obviously, Embiid, and it doesn't seem like James Harden is going to be there, but I guess we're going to find out later next week. So obviously a rival team. It's a pretty hot start to the regular season for the Milwaukee Bucks, but plenty to talk about from today's show. Let us know, were you surprised by the honesty of Giannis and where he said that he's at leading into the regular season? What are you expecting from Dame? Do you want to see Khris on the weekend? All those talking points, get involved in the show on the YouTube chat there. And we've got one more show to go this week. We'll have another one for you tomorrow. I'm trying to drag Frank on here to run through some stuff leading into the preseason finale against the Memphis Grizzlies. And then next week, it's all about the regular season. We might try and sneak in an over and under show. We've done that every one of the last 5 or 6 years here. So we'll try and get that done for you as well. But if you haven't done so yet, subscribe. We're not far away from 8K subscriptions. We'll see if we can knock that over before we get to opening night. We'll leave it there. For myself and Justin, let us know what you thought. We'll speak to you all tomorrow.